Hi, Andrew Cushman here with another episode of Don't Miss This. Today's topic is flood zones. I'm actually standing here at one of our properties in Houston, Texas, that during the Memorial Day floods of 2015 had no damage, during the tax day floods of 2016 had no damage, and then just a couple of weeks ago, the Hurricane Harvey tragedy, we also had no flooding and no damage. And while you can't guarantee that you'll never have a flooding problem, there are definitely things you can do to stack the odds in your favor. And the one that we're going to talk about today, the one that we do, is always check flood zones before you buy any piece of real estate. So part of some of the things that goes into that are searching online for articles. You search Google the current property name plus flood and see if there's any news articles written about it. You'll be surprised at what you find. You can also get an elevation certificate, which basically verifies the exact elevation of your property. And the big thing really is just going to the FEMA website and checking the flood zone maps to see what kind of flood zone you're in. So that's what we're going to focus on today. Again, with the FEMA flood zones, that's something that you can do yourself. You can easily train a manager to do it, or you can even train, in our case, a VA to do it now, and just send you the report, and then that's your starting point. So I'm going to go ahead and hop on the computer and show you exactly how to do that, and then we'll come back and see what that flood zone map kind of looks like in real life. All right, so here we are. We're going to go check the FEMA flood maps. So just like with about anything else in the world nowadays, the easiest thing to do is just start with Google. So we'll Google FEMA flood maps. This brings up the site that we're looking for at just msc.fema.gov. So we'll click through. And brings you to the main page. All you got to do is just put the address of the property you're looking for right in here. So we'll do that. Houston, Texas. And we'll see what comes up. So if we scroll down just a little bit, we've got a street map, and that little pin right there is our property. This is correct. If you look at these grids, these basically designate the various flood map parcels, and they're labeled right here. So just keep this in mind, because if this pulls up and you see that your property is like way down in the bottom right corner like this one is, if you download the actual map, it might be kind of hard to find. So just keep that in mind. But for viewing purposes, we're going to go to View Web Map, and we're going to an external site. So just click OK for the warning, and it pulls up Google Earth, and then it overlays the flood zones. So we'll zoom in just a bit to make this a little easier to see. I'll let it load. So, all right, this right here is our property. This is the property I was standing at just a few minutes ago. So we do have the right parcel. And let's look at the flood zone. So you can see our property is in this light orange area. If you go over to the legend here on the left, you'll see that says 0.2 annual chance flood hazard. And it's also labeled right here. So that's part of Zone X, which basically means we have a 1 in 500 year chance of seeing flooding to the depth of 1 to 3 feet. That is generally not considered a flood prone area. So if you look just to the north and east, though, you'll see this kind of bluish green Zone AE. Again, going over to the legend on the left, that's the 1% annual chance flood hazard. Essentially, this area has a 1% chance in any given year of flooding, and so it's considered the 100-year floodplain, and this is a full-on flood zone. Generally speaking, if you got a property in this area, the lenders will require flood insurance, and flooding is a serious concern. This is an area that we would not buy in, and of course, we did decide to buy here in the 500-year area. During Hurricane Harvey, none of these properties flooded. During the tax day floods, the back of this property flooded, and during the Memorial Day floods, a good chunk of this property here flooded, and then many of the properties off the screen were completely flooded. So the easiest way to create a report or save this is probably just hover over your property and right click and go down to take a screenshot. Another way is to just go back to the original tab that we started on, and you can just go to download, and that'll bring up a zip file, Windows Explorer. And so here's the map that we just downloaded. So we'll open that. I can show you what it means. So this one, as you can tell, is a little bit harder to read. It's black and white, not particularly labeled really well. And if you look right down here, this is where our property is. This is our property that we were looking at in the orange. So again, this is a good way to download the map, but it's a little bit harder to read. And then just for reference, I'm going to be heading over to the bayou here in a minute. So this is the bayou that is off to the north and west of us. And if you look at these diagonal lines, that is a regulatory floodway, which means that has to be kept completely clear. And then the actual channel is right down here in the middle. So hopefully this helps, and let's go take a look.
Okay, so now if you remember from the flood map on the computer, there was a bayou nearby. That's the bayou that you're seeing right here behind me. And so the actual water channel is about where the water level is right now. And then the horizontal lines, the flood channel, that's the area that has to be kept clear. So essentially, actually I'm standing in that area right now where this little walkway is, basically up to the edges of the bayou where you see the mowed grass. The next part of the flood zone that is a real concern is the AE flood zone, and that is the area that there's a 1% chance in any given year, so the 100-year floodplain, that water will flood those areas. And if you look behind me here, these buildings, they are in that AE zone, and then these apartment complex across the street from where I was earlier, that is also in that zone. And in the tax day, Memorial Day floods, those properties both took on water. And so now if we turn around, just to give you some perspective, hopefully without making you sick or giving you vertigo, during those floods, that bridge behind me was underwater. And in Hurricane Harvey here just a couple of weeks ago, the water was just a couple of feet from the bottom. So as you can see, determining the flood zones can have a huge impact on your property. And at the end of the day, it's a business decision, because one can say, well, geez, they've got properties in flood zones, so they must be able to make it work somehow. It's a matter of, number one, if you're going to buy a property in a flood zone, do you want your residents and you to go through the headache of having to deal with all of your downstairs units getting wiped out? The second thing is you're probably going to have to buy flood insurance, and it would be wise to do so. Well, flood insurance is typically unpredictable and expensive, meaning you are going to have a competitive disadvantage to the property just down the block that doesn't have to pay for that. So for us, we will not buy anything in a 100-year flood zone. We will not buy anything, obviously, in a channel. We will consider buying something that isn't in a 500-year flood zone. Typically, flood insurance isn't required for that. And again, it's a 500-year event, so you're talking about a 0.2% chance in any given year of having flooding, I believe up to 1 to 3 feet. So hopefully this was informative and helpful. And again, hopefully flooding is something that you never have to deal with. There are other types of flooding. There's coastal flooding, there's flooding from plumbing issues and all that, but that will be saved for another episode. Take care.